Hello, everyone, and welcome to the December Filled with Less show. I'm Cynthia Damascus.
And I am Molly Savran. And yes, December. How is that possible?
It's not possible. Do you realize we've been doing this a year now?
No.
Our show is a year old as of this month. Yes.
I did not realize that. That is amazing.
It is amazing. And I know that you have been incredibly busy over this past month. It's the Nativity Fast. You've had all kinds of things going on. Tell us what you've been up to.
Well, I mean, besides the normal planning that we're all doing, I'm sure, as you start thinking about, we had Thanksgiving straight, obviously, into Christmas and New Year. And, for us, that means college kids coming home and kind of maneuvering all of the, the family get-togethers. And besides that, we've also been doing a lot of work filled with less work this month.
We have.
So we have, the show today, and we had retreats we're planning for.
Oh, I am so excited. So Molly and I, just so y'all know, Molly and I are leaving right after the taping of the show today to go to Grand Rapids for our first speaking engagement, the first retreat we're leading since COVID started.
Right.
So it's been 2 years.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So that has been exciting, and also a lot of planning for that. Yeah, a lot of work for that. And then we also have our course that we're going to relaunch in January.
Yes.
So, they're all good things, but it's a lot of things.
They are. Yeah, it's a lot. And then also, though, the deep dive this month for the membership was on personal asceticism, which in the midst of busyness, like we're talking about right now, it's really hard to cultivate personal asceticism.
Yeah, I have been so thankful, actually, that was the deep dive you chose for December. So perfect, because I think it really has helped me find a balance that's really hard to do in terms of being okay with, not everything being perfect, or being okay with interruptions, or, having things, not all or nothing is where I tend to go. Mm-hmm. And that personal asceticism, which you described so beautifully even in our intro video to that this month, just kind of say what it is. How did you describe it, the personal asceticism? Do you remember?
Well, the personal asceticism to me is what you practice every day intentionally that keeps you connected with our Lord. So it could be starting with your morning routine, which I always call my morning ascesis. Mm-hmm. Ascesis is always one of my favorite words.
Yeah.
Which is why that's the original name of my planner, and everyone was like, what? What does that mean? But it's just establishing a pattern of staying close to God throughout the day.
Yes. And because of that, I think it has helped me be able to focus on the stillness, the waiting that is all part of Advent, mm-hmm. while also having to do these other necessary tasks.
Yes.
They have to be done as well. And one thing that you brought up when you were talking about personal ascesis, you referred to the book, The Spirit of Happiness,
yes.
by the monks of New Skeet.
I love that.
Yes, and how they described personal asceticism, which was really helpful to me, was it's not something to make our lives miserable or to add one more thing to our busy schedule. Asceticism, or that kind of self-discipline, is always for the purpose of growth. Mm-hmm. And it's always to help us more effectively respond to life.
Yes.
Through Christ. And I think that's exactly what it does. I mean, so, throughout the day, when I'm not sure how to respond or what to prioritize, or what to drop, or what to say or not say, having that personal asceticism in the morning is what really brings me that kind of steady pace.
Exactly.
And so I think for the month of December, it's just been especially important to me to have that morning time.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Me too. And It seems like I have my morning time down, but it's throughout the day that I just like lose track of what's going on, and I feel like I'm just treading water and keeping afloat when it does have to be intentional.
Yeah, we were talking about that actually in one of our membership open chats. How I feel like my morning routine is like pretty good. Like I love it. I mean, I really love that personal ascesis. Like I look forward to it. It's my time. It's my time to fill up. It's quiet. But where I struggle is the wind down. Yeah. At the end of the day, I still have to work on that. And usually by the end of that day, I kind of peter out. So but one thing at a time.
Exactly. Exactly. And what's important is that you don't beat yourself up about things like this.
Right.
We all want personal asceticism. We all want to stick to routine. We all want to stay close to God in our entire daily life, but we can't beat ourselves up about it. And when we do, a lot of times that comes from negative self-talk.
Right.
Which makes me think of our lineup for today. So why don't we go over what our lineup is? First, for our Peaceful Mind segment, we have Alicia Michelle with us. Alicia is a Christian mindset coach and a neuro coach. She's going to be talking about negative self-talk. Then in the Healthy Body segment, we have Dr. Annell Mavrantonis. She is an integrative psychiatrist. She's fascinating. You're going to love this interview, and it's going to give a lot of people hope. And then in the Productive Life segment, we're going to be bringing up a topic that has to do with the holidays, and I'm not going to give it away now. We'll talk about that later.
As a Bible teacher and Christian life coach, Alicia Michelle empowers women to cultivate a thriving connection with Christ, renew their thoughts, and live a confident, balanced life. Through her signature coaching programs, Bible studies, and her training as a certified neuro coach, she helps women connect with God, discover calm, balance, and enjoy a renewed thought life.
Hello, Alicia. Thank you so much for coming on the Filled with Less show. This is really special to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you guys and to be sharing together.
Thank you. I love that we are on the same page on so many things, and what you work on with your clients is so close to what we work on with our community. So today, I know we're going to be talking about a topic that a lot of our community struggles with, and that's negative self-talk. I guess I want to know, you're used to seeing clients who are self-sabotaging with negative self-talk, and we're wondering how you teach them to recognize it.
Well, I just first want to say that self-talk is something that we're all having. So even though I have the honor of working with women who are wanting to address it, it's something that we all struggle with, and it's something that it's not something that we're alone in, I guess, is what I would say. So when we talk about this whole idea of negative self-talk, the inner critic, these things that are happening, I think the enemy's greatest attempt to keep us stuck in it is to keep us unaware of what's happening, to keep us just kind of busy or distracted or running to other self-sabotaging behaviors, to keep us from actually addressing what's happening. So the very first thing that we always talk about is looking at it and acknowledging it and noticing it, but noticing it from not a judgmental, like, I'm so bad, I know I shouldn't be doing this. I mean, we're not here to offer more shame on ourselves because of it, but noticing it almost like a scientist, like a removed outside observer looking at it, and then noticing, what is it that I'm seeing as a pattern? When does it come up? What is it related to in my life? And with the Lord's help, getting a perspective on it that's a loving, kind, healing perspective. And so that's where we start, is that perspective of noticing it from a kind perspective versus a shame-filled perspective, which if we do notice it, that's often how we notice it, unfortunately. So
yes, and I love how when I've heard you talk about this on your podcasts, you've talked about it like a soundtrack that's running in your mind constantly.
Yeah, so often these negative self-talk or these negative thought patterns are literally patterns, and they are founded inside of our subconscious mind, which is why we can logically say, well, why don't I just believe that God loves me? Or why don't I just believe that I'm okay or I'm enough or whatever the situation is? And it's like there's some sort of subconscious patterning that's happening inside of our mind that our brain is reverting to. And so without that removal of those negative thought patterns, our brain's going to continually default to that. So that's why I love to work with women to figure out what is that pattern on this very deep level, not just like, I don't feel good about myself in XYZ, or I'm saying these negative things to myself, but really coming down to what usually is one of three questions, which is, am I worthy? Am I enough? And am I loved? And our subconscious mind has answered those questions by the time we're around age 13. So however it's answered it, whether it's I am worthy when I achieve, I am worthy when I look good in front of others, I'm worthy when I'm pleasing other people, I am loved when I do XYZ, whatever it is, that is what the default programming is going to go to. And that's why we can continue to be stuck in these places. So we get to, what I love to do is be able to work with women on a neurological level using scripture also, because they work perfectly together, to figure out what's in there and then literally rewire them with getting rid of the old thought and putting the new thought in its place. So that's the work I get to do as a coach, as a mindset coach.
Yeah, and I love how you talked, two things is the ability to kind of use that prefrontal cortex to pause and be an observer of the own, the own voices in our head. A lot of times we just take it for granted. We just accept it as truth. So being able to kind of step back and see those things as thought patterns removes kind of the heightened emotion from that. And then also to look at ourselves compassionately as we do that. And I think those are two really important steps that you mentioned to kind of getting a hold on this pattern that is really quite sabotaging, like we mentioned, and also keeps us from really walking in our God-given identity. Would you say that that's something that you've experienced in your practice?
Definitely. Before we talk about that, I wanted to address what you just said about looking at it on an outside observer. One of the greatest gifts that God has given us in our mind is that we have a separate mind and a brain. So we are the only creatures in creation who can stand outside of our brain, literally, and decide, hey, do I want to think about that or do I not want to think about that? We are more than just animals. We're more than just, oh, I have a thought, so I have to respond. So it's this God-given opportunity every day. Like it says, his mercies are new every morning. We have new neurological cells literally that are born every single second. So it's every second having the new opportunity to say, all right, I thought this before, but God's redemption is new. And so I'm going to step out into this new thought pattern right now and look at it from a new perspective. I have that decision. I have that ability and that choice. So in terms of identity, yes, absolutely. These questions that our mind has answered on the subconscious level, these are identity-based questions. This is the new identity that God wants to give us as his daughters. And if we have some discrepancies in how that looks or how we've defined that, it absolutely is going to affect how we relate to him, how we see him, how we view others, the decisions we make, the actions we take. So it's so important that we take these things seriously. I mean, I think sometimes we think, well, we all have negative thoughts, like whatever, it's just how I am or how I was raised, or, this is what I heard my whole life, whatever. But the reality is when God came to give us salvation, he came to save us, every single part of us. And that salvation starts today. It starts now with renewing our mind. If we are to have new actions that are in line with what God has for us, it has to start with our thoughts. Both brain science and the scriptures show that. So yeah, he came to give us a new identity, and that starts first with a new identity in our thoughts.
Yeah, I love that. I think that a lot of people are letting their thoughts hold them back, and they don't really cognizantly think, okay, I can change this thought. I have control over that. I can think something differently. They think that it's just automatic, and I love that you made that clear, that we're the only part of God's creation that can do that.
Right. Yeah, it's truly a gift. And I refer to it as being the air traffic controller of your mind. So the air traffic controller decides what planes land at an airport, and when they land, how they land, what runway they land on. We are not ever going to get rid of negative thoughts because negative thoughts are there, honestly, quite often to protect us. It's part of our brain's hardwiring to keep us safe. That's the brain's number one job. So it's not that we're trying to get rid of these negative thoughts. We're just trying to manage them in a way that honors the new creation God has made in us. And so as an air traffic controller, we can say, yeah, that's true. I'm going to let that sink into my soul. I'm going to let that be who I am. Or we can say, that is not true. I am refusing that. I'm not going to focus on that. So it's the difference between, yeah, it may come, it may be there, but am I going to dwell in it? Am I going to sit in it? Am I going to play with it? Am I going to just let it kind of filter on it and build this habit? Because the thing is with the brain too, is it's what is repeated is what is continually practiced. So if we have those same thoughts over and over, the brain's going, oh, okay, she wants to automate this. So this is the thought, the process we're just going to keep having. So it's so important for us to stop, see what's there, and decide, what am I going to focus on? What am I going to dwell on moving forward?
Yeah. I know a lot of people in our audience are thinking, oh my gosh, this sounds exactly like what I need to do, but it's so hard. So do you have any tips and tricks to share with people so that they have a takeaway?
Sure. There's, of course, so much that we could share and talk about, and it's hard to condense it down into like a few sound bites here. But what I would say is a very simple 3-step process that I teach for dealing with in the moment emotions is a great place to start with this. And of course, being aware is huge. Like that's definitely a first place to go. But I teach something called ADD, and it's not ADD like the technical term we all think of ADD. It's to acknowledge, to discern, and to decide. So first, to acknowledge the thought that it's real, that it makes sense. I'm feeling this way. It's logical that this is happening. Why I'm afraid or I'm scared. Usually, these thoughts are based in pain. In pain or fear. I was trying to say those words at the same time. They don't quite work. Pain or fear. And if we can figure out what that is, it's huge. But understanding, yes, that it makes sense. I am in this situation where I am stressed out or I'm afraid of this happening again. So it makes sense that I'm reacting this way. And then to discern, okay, so what's true and what's not true about this? Logically saying, yeah, it's true that this may happen, but it's also true that this whole thing may not happen this way, or God may do something different, or whatever. What's true and what's not true, and then to decide. So in light of all of that I've seen, here's what I'm going to choose to do. Here's what I'm going to choose to dwell. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to choose. This is what I'm going to do moving forward. So in the Christian Mindset Makeover, we talk about brain priming as the main way to rewire our thoughts, because brain priming is this neurological process that literally removes those negative thoughts, that core subconscious programming that's causing the root of all the thoughts that we're having, and replaces them with God's truth. So the first 5 weeks of the course are figuring out, how have those thoughts been there? So I'm happy to say, like, yes, ADD is awesome, but I also know that is not really the true answer to this, because there is something causing that pain deeper and lower inside that we have to get to the root of. And so when we create the brain priming, we've figured out, using all these different ways of things that we've looked at, different patterns, different ideas, why it's there. And then we're creating a brand new thought pattern and literally replaying that and replugging that into our mind, so that when we get to the other side of that, it becomes so much easier to look at something like ADD and go, oh, okay, yeah, because the foundational programming has already been put there. It's much easier to refute it in the moment. So ADD is a great tool, but just to say that the subconscious programming and rewiring is really the core of what a lot of us need. And that's where we see the greatest healing, is when we can do that kind of work.
Yeah. It's really encouraging that, you have that kind of control. Sometimes we feel so much out of control in our circumstances and our lives, and to be able to take back control where we can is, I think, very empowering. And, there's, like you said, I know even through journaling, there's another effective way to kind of do that inner work, to sit down and for me, to write out maybe the lies I'm telling myself and reframe them, and make that effort to make time for that important inner work.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that's not only just a nicety that makes us feel good, it's a command from God. He tells us to take captive those thoughts. He tells us to get serious about it. And it's because it is because we can feel peaceful, and we can be able to have that that full life that he promises us. But I think there's a bigger picture to it too. And that is, as we are more in line with the Spirit of God, we are able to let his light shine, and we are able to make a bigger impact in this world. How many of us are being held back or like a damper being put on our soul and our ability to share and ability to be God's best, because these thoughts have just got us hogtied, right, into this perspective of who we really aren't, but who we've allowed ourselves to be. So to me, there's this huge motivation. And that's actually the first week we talk about in the course is, what is your why on a deep level? Yes, for you, but how does it affect your family if you were to change these thoughts? How does it affect your walk with God? How does it affect our world? How are you not able to be who all you're supposed to be because of how these thoughts are affecting you? So yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And it's so exciting because when women get this freedom, it's just like a whole world opens up to, wow, what could God do in me? Because I now am operating from a completely different perspective than what I was before.
That's right. I love that you've been bringing up your course, the Christian Mindset Makeover. Can you tell everyone a little bit more about it and how they can sign up? Because from what I understand, it's just opened up again recently, right?
It has, yeah. Thank you for allowing me to share about that. Yeah, it's a 9-week course that helps women get to the root of these subconscious patterns, these core soundtracks, and helps them rewire their mind on a neurological level using brain priming. So we create this brain priming script and we use that through this 67-day neural cycle of going through the brain priming. And also we give you all of the things to protect your mind moving forward after that. All kinds of, we have offensive strategies in the beginning to figure out the brain prime, but we call them defensive strategies, and afterwards, how to set up boundaries, but all these different things. The purpose of the course is this really encapsulation of what my coaching has been. I began to see the patterns of women addressing these issues and how they needed to address them in different ways. So it's basically this coaching put into a 9-week capsule for women to go through and get that transformation in a really powerful, impactful way. And what I love about it, and what women tell me they love about it, is that it goes very deep, and that it combines the science, brain science, with the truth of God, which I think is so needed and missing. We have sometimes people talking about it like brain renewing our mind and stuff from just a scriptural point of view. Like, here are the scriptures, just memorize them, just do them. And then there's this other side that's like, well, there's this stuff going on neurologically, and this course marries both of them from both perspectives. And so, yeah, you can learn more about the course at vibrantchristianliving.com/mindset-makeover. Or I have a free workshop that explains more about the course and also teaches you some very practical tools on how to transform your thoughts and transform your life. And that is vibrantchristianliving.com/mind. So I recommend that ladies start there at that free workshop to learn more about this whole process. And you can walk away even just from that workshop with some great stuff to move forward. But yeah, that's a great next step for taking ownership of our thoughts and moving forward.
Well, thank you, Alicia, and I can attest your free resources, your free workshop, everything you do, your Vibrant Christian Living podcast, everything you do is so high quality and so thoughtful, and you're so articulate.
Thanks.
And just thank you for everything you do for women all over the world.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate that, and it's an honor to be here with you guys today. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
You know, Cynthia, as Alicia was talking, it made me think about how often maybe we've robbed not just ourselves, but even our families and our communities of all that we could be, you know, all the gifts that we could offer just because of this negative self-talk. You know, we're not using our God-given potential when we sabotage ourselves in that way.
I love that you're saying that. I never had really put that together before, and you're right. We're not only hurting ourselves, we're hurting everyone around us, and we're not living up to who God created us to be. I think that that's a beautiful point. And I loved how Alicia said that when we are thinking negative thoughts or worst case scenarios, there is a part of our brain that automatically goes there in order to protect us. And we need to tell ourselves, no, it's okay. I don't need the protection because I can handle anything that comes along. And it's really a dialogue you have with yourself. I loved how she talked about all of that.
Yeah. No, it's very good. And again, just important to remember to do the intentional work.
Exactly. Be intentional. That's what we're always talking about, intentionality. Well, that wraps up the Peaceful Mind segment. Next, we will get on to the healthy body. Dr. Annell Mavrantonis is an integrative and reproductive psychiatrist. After studying nutrition science as an undergraduate at Indiana University, she graduated from Loyola University Stritch School of Medicine. She went on to study psychiatry at University of California, San Diego, and the Medical College of Wisconsin. After finishing her residency in psychiatry, she continued to pursue further education in integrative medicine through the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, and the Institute for Functional Nutrition. Currently, she brings integrative psychiatry to hospitalized patients, new moms, and on the front line in the emergency department. Hello, Annell. Thank you so much for coming on the Filled with Less show. We really love that you're with us this month.
It's my pleasure.
So I have a question for you. So you're an integrative psychiatrist, and I'm just wondering for our audience, what is an integrative psychiatrist, and how do you even work mind-body medicine into your practice?
I'm really glad you asked that, because as I thought more about what an integrative psychiatrist is, really, psychiatry in its very nature is integrative. So psychiatry from the beginning of the profession has been looking, for example, at development, looking at how somebody's early life experiences impact disease states or symptoms that they might be experiencing. So that is integrative in and of itself. And that's something actually that our mainstream medical colleagues have even begun to embrace, looking at how adverse childhood experiences impact disease and the impact of stress and the various stress hormones on disease states later in life. Psychiatry in general also looks at biological underpinnings and embraces mindfulness, at least. That's something that has grown even more over the last, since I've been in practice, over the last 20 years. I think integrative psychiatry takes it one step deeper. So I know it's going to be different for every integrative psychiatrist, because different people are going to have different approaches. In general, it's a very holistic approach. And in addition to looking at the developmental underpinnings, in addition to utilizing mind-body skills, in integrative psychiatry, mind-body medicine is at the core. And we look a little bit deeper. The best example I could give, for the viewers and the listeners, would be that a mainstream psychiatrist may recognize that anemia, for example, can cause some symptoms similar to depression. An integrative psychiatrist is probably going to go deeper, looking at why their patient has anemia, and then the why of the why. So looking even further at, for example, if somebody has iron deficiency, we're going to really dig deep to see why and what kind of imbalance is within the body that we can support to restore to normal.
Oh my gosh, I love that example. That made it so clear. Thank you.
Oh, good.
And
Good.
You know what? It's actually encouraging to me, because I wouldn't have even thought of a mainstream psychiatrist looking at anemia at that connection. So thank goodness that really is happening. I didn't realize it.
Yeah, we're trained in our residency training, and I finished medical school in 2000, so I trained in early 2000. We are trained to look at, for example, iron deficiency anemia, hypothyroidism, your basic common causes of illness that can mimic depression, basically. Okay. But I think with functional medicine, which I incorporated in terms of integrative psychiatry, we really look at then why. If somebody is iron deficient, why are they iron deficient? Let's not just treat the iron deficiency, let's get to the underpinning. And that, I think, is one of the differences.
Yeah.
That, and also, I guess, treatment modalities are different. And that depends on each practitioner and each patient and what treatment modalities our patients desire.
Right. So I know that you've been doing this for quite some time. Do you have any success stories where you've been able to incorporate lifestyle and nutrition and you've seen huge improvements?
Yes, I was thinking about that. I have so many success stories, right? But I was thinking about which one I'd want to share with you today. So I'm not going to use a name, of course, but and this was actually many years ago. This was back in maybe 2007, that I treated a woman who was a professor. So professors, if seeking a tenured professor track, they often need to relocate. It's a very difficult job to find, apparently. I learned this from her. So she had relocated to a small town in Wisconsin where I practiced. I had no family in the area, was all alone, relocated to start her profession as a professor. And she had 2 really successful years, had relationships, enjoyed her work, it was meaningful, and was feeling well. Had never had a psychiatric symptom in her life, had no family history of psychiatric illness, so wasn't really presenting with any particular vulnerability to psychiatric illness. And after a couple years, she started to have a decrease in her functioning, and she was in her early 30s. So this decrease in functioning manifested with her getting behind in her work. And the way she described it to me, the first couple years of being a professor are often the hardest. The early years are very difficult when you're developing a lot of material that you're going to be using with your students. And so she'd actually developed a lot of that, but yet she was getting behind at work. And it was so severe that by the time she came to me, she was not just on probation, but the idea that she might lose her job was very real. And she was also quite isolated because she was experiencing this at home as well. And this was somebody who had never had any hoarding or OCD kind of symptoms, and she couldn't wash her dishes. She had gotten to the point where she had bought new sets of flatware and dishes and whatnot, and had even wasn't doing her laundry. She had actually purchased clothing because she couldn't keep up with her laundry. She said her house was in disarray, and she had a lot of shame about that. And as you can imagine, she was pretty isolated because of this. The people that she met in this town hadn't known her beforehand. So, she just didn't have a lot of support. And even so, the therapist who referred her to me was one of the most loving, accepting therapist. And when she referred the patient to me, she was frustrated. And my patient had seen other doctors, had been tried on medicine. Like, people thought, well, maybe she had ADHD. So they tried her on stimulants. They tried her on antidepressants. And they were getting frustrated with her. And she could sense that. And it was affecting her own sense of hope. So I have to tell you, she had no physical symptoms, no GI symptoms. So I'm giving you a hint for what she ended up having. But she had no diarrhea, no constipation, nothing. Her skin looked healthy. Her hair looked a little thin to me, but some people just have thinner hair, and she didn't notice that her hair had been thinning. And so really her primary symptoms were in this motivation. She had developed some anxiety. So my first step was to do a nutritional workup. It picked up on several deficiencies, which again, I could not address in her diet. She was not a vegetarian. She was not, oftentimes we see like iron deficiency anemia in young women due to menstrual bleeding. She didn't have heavy menstrual periods. We really didn't have a reason. She had iron deficiency, B12 deficiency, zinc deficiency. All of these things can lead to some of the symptoms that she was having. And this is where I think integrative psychiatry comes in. We didn't just treat her, because I did start to treat her nutritional deficiencies to help her feel better. But I was concerned because here she had a diet that should be rich in these nutrients, and she wasn't absorbing them. So so B12 deficiency, one of those, oftentimes we see B12 deficiency with a methylation pathway defect. Mm-hmm. And we can test for that genetically. People have many different ways many different genetic variances, basically. But she couldn't afford that, so we didn't test for it. So instead, I just supported her with a little bit of methylated B12. We used parenteral B12, so we gave her injections as opposed to oral, because my suspicion was that her B12 was also low because she was in so much stress that her gastric juices weren't going, and you need that for B12 absorption. But then that couldn't explain the other nutrient deficiencies. So I did test her for celiac disease, I bet you were guessing that, because if you're saying no GI distress, she did have celiac disease. So when I called her to inform her she had celiac disease, I told her, like, I explained to her what it is. And this, for our listeners and viewers who might not be familiar, it's an autoimmune disease. And the trigger is gluten. And so I instructed her to go on a gluten-free diet. But I knew I wanted to talk to her more about diet, because just cutting out gluten, although that's very important when you have celiac disease, it's critical, wouldn't necessarily be enough. So I told her to go gluten-free, scheduled her a follow-up with me, and she followed up with her primary care physician. And when she came in, it was probably, I wish I could remember exactly, but it was probably like 1 or 2 weeks when she came to see me. All she had done was given up gluten. So she was eating pretty much what I call the standard American diet, and that's something that we refer to in integrative medicine.
Sad.
And she converted to the gluten-free standard American diet. So whereas, the highly processed foods that she was eating that might have contained gluten got replaced with gluten-free, which you can imagine, if with the symptoms she was having, the idea of making her own food would have been overwhelming.
Sure.
And so, but she felt better when she came in. Not 100%, of course, but excuse me, she had significant improvements. And so I talked to her a little bit about what I refer to it as either the anti-inflammatory diet or a Mediterranean diet, which is what I was advising at the time to help decrease inflammation. Because, she had shown us that she was vulnerable to autoimmune diseases, and she got celiac disease, but we wanted to address what was causing her discomfort and her distress, but we also wanted to help her not get sick again.
Right.
And so I talked to her a little bit about an anti-inflammatory diet. I did my typical thing, which was, let's add one vegetable, just trying to make small changes so it wasn't overwhelming. And this is what was really remarkable. So she came back a month later, and she had made such a change in her diet. So, she was a professor. She liked to read. She left my office, had read what was available at the time. There's so much more available now. And she had adopted a Mediterranean diet, had really gone really deep into her health. And she was even able to incorporate mindfulness. So she was somebody, I said, mind body medicine is usually at the core. Yeah. She was so sick that we weren't really able to do a lot of work along those lines. And she was somebody who she didn't have a very strong spiritual background. So I talked to her about, okay, just taking, and I did this when she came in for the follow-up, just take a few deep breaths before you eat. Try not to multitask when you're eating. Try to find a place within her apartment, which was in a lot of disarray, that you can just clear a little window so that you don't have to look at it while you're eating. And she did more than that. Like she cleaned out her apartment, which sounded overwhelming. She was getting on track. She ended up maintaining her job, and she even incorporated gratitude. I often like to talk about using a blessing before meal to help slow down. And so she was just taking her deep breaths and expressing gratitude in that moment. So it was pretty profound, the difference.
Wow, absolutely. And I love all the modalities that you combined, which is interesting because it's very similar to how I work with my clients as a health coach. You just bring all of these components together and just miraculous things happen. And they all seem so simple and easy. I mean, they're hard to implement, but it's like, oh yeah, add this, don't do that. Watch what you eat, and just the major ramifications of where you can go from a psychiatric standpoint is like miraculous. And I always come back to, didn't God create our bodies so beautifully that this could even happen, that you could turn around something like she was going through with just eating clean and gratitude and prayer. What a great testament to integrative psychiatry. I didn't even know it existed until I met you, and I just love that you're doing this.
Oh, thank you.
So,
sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was thinking about, this is my favorite case to share. Excuse me, but not every case happens that quickly. And so I wanted to mention that for the listeners and the viewers, that not to be discouraged, because usually, you think about how long it's taken to get to the point where you're not feeling well. Just like we tell women, hey, it took 9 months for your body to create a baby. Be gentle on yourself as you're recovering from delivering a baby. I like to talk to people about that as well, that it takes time, and you have to be gentle with yourself. And typically, I think taking small steps is a much easier way to approach
Absolutely. And more sustainable too.
Yes.
As you build those habits. So for the people in the audience right now who might be experiencing some sort of psychiatric diagnosis, what are some top tips that you would give them as they end this podcast or stop watching the show that they can implement right away?
So my first one would be to slow down in general and take inventory of your life and assess what in my life is nourishing me. What is bringing me joy? What is enhancing my spiritual life and my relationships? And if there are things that are not nourishing you and you're able to pare down, assess that. And also, are there things that you need in your life that are going to nourish you more that you need to add to your life? So kind of just slowing down and taking an inventory. So that's my first tip. And then I guess I can add that to one of my other tips, which is don't eat on the go, like slow down when you eat as well, because I really do believe we are physically what we eat, right? But we're more than that. We're much more than what we eat, how we eat, our spiritual life, all is part of who we are, right? But try to slow down, try not to eat on the go. Even if you have the ideal meal in front of you that is like perfect for you and you're eating it while you're driving, you're probably not, you're not getting to absorb some of those nutrients.
Right.
And then another tip I often give people that I won't go into too much detail because I know you cover this a lot is just taking time to organize your life in a way that serves you and what you value. I think that's really important, especially for parents who can often feel pulled in many different directions. And especially, I do reproductive psychiatry. And so I work with a lot of women who are transitioning into motherhood. And that's something that's really helpful. And then one more would be to practice saying no. Again, this is probably geared a lot more towards my reproductive psychiatry patients, and practice that with a buddy who supports you in saying no. So you probably don't want to practice this with somebody who's not keen on the idea that you're setting limits.
Right.
And sometimes that can look like just saying, I'll get back to you. If you have a really hard time saying no, just creating a pause when somebody asks you for something. And then my nutritional one is just to eat more vegetables, however that looks, and be gentle with yourself. If you need to buy prepackaged washed vegetables, that's what I do. We don't all have to have this ideal like farmer's market bounty that looks beautiful in our refrigerator. My go-to is baby carrots. When I'm had a busy day at work, I always have baby carrots in my refrigerator and some sort of protein. And so if things get too hectic, I can slow down.
Right. Well, thank you. Those were all wonderful tips. And hopefully the people who are listening or watching right now can take away everything that they could be doing and just experiment and see how they feel and what happens and see if anything subsides.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much for being with us today, Annell. It was so wonderful to have you on, and we just appreciate it, and it was a pleasure to get to know you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Molly, that interview was so encouraging to me to know that there are psychiatrists out there who are practicing mind-body medicine, that there is even such a thing as integrative psychiatrists and functional medicine psychiatrists. It's just, I think it gives everyone hope.
Yeah, it made me wish we all had access to that kind of comprehensive care. I mean, her case study was so fascinating to me and really very eye-opening.
It really was. It was for me too. And what's so beautiful is that even if someone doesn't have access to that kind of care, the tips she gave at the end were so easily doable, it can be a no-brainer. There are a lot of people who have been labeled with certain psychiatric disorders, and I know it's very disheartening for them to believe that, I have ADHD or I have all of these other schizophrenia even. Labels, thinking it's genetic or something, but just as we've talked about in the past, there's more information going from your gut to your brain than your brain to your gut. So there's so much that you can do.
Right, just beautiful ways to support your body and your system for health.
Exactly. So that wraps up our Healthy Body segment. The next one is Productive Life, and of course, it's holiday themed.
So today's community question is very relatable and very seasonally appropriate. The question is, help! How do I manage the stress of holiday expectations? You know, I think we all feel a little bit of pressure to make the holidays like so magical.
Yes.
We have a lot of, we just want to make it so memorable and perfect. Do you experience that as well?
I do. And, it's funny because I will admit on international internet TV here that my husband and I like to watch Hallmark movies and Great American Christmas movies and sometimes Up TV, although they're not as good. We're connoisseurs, you see.
Oh, are you? Oh,
yes,
I see. Good.
And it's so funny because they all have the same things in common. Like they're all drinking hot chocolate and they're going ice skating and they're building gingerbread houses and obviously caroling and just one thing after another and I mean, I get overwhelmed watching this, and my husband, Demetrius, he's always joking, like, hey, are we going to make gingerbread houses? Which, of course, we've never done. But there are the expectations that our family puts on us, the way we grew up, right? We might want to continue those expectations. Then there are things like the Hallmark Channel that add to those. And then there's our own personal feeling of we need to like be the best hostess we can be or set up the best Christmas memories for our kids and they'll never forget these wonderful Christmases we had. Just so much pressure.
Yeah.
But let's just narrow it down to what's important, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that is somewhat of a relatively recent phenomenon, is having exposure to, like you said, we have the Hallmark Channel, we have Pinterest, we have HGTV, we have all of these crafts and recipes, and we want to do them all. Right, and we feel like this is what it means to have like a truly celebrated holiday, or this is the standard. This is the standard for us. Whereas years ago, I even remember from my own grandparents. I mean, they did have their consistent traditions. We did the same thing. They made the same Christmas cookies, but really, it was a much simpler holiday celebration.
Yes. They weren't able to compare themselves with everyone around the whole world and what's everyone else doing.
Yeah.
I think that getting back to just the basics, I mean, it's about the birth of Christ. It's not about all this other extracurricular stuff. One of the things about the Hallmark Channel is that they're always saying Christmas is about magic or Christmas is about family, which it is to family to a degree, but it's like always about all this other stuff, but they never come out and say, it's about the birth of Christ, which is really the only thing we need to be focusing on.
Yeah, and actually, when I've been I almost separate like this idea of Christmas from like when you're something about saying, I am celebrating the Feast of the Nativity.
Yes.
That puts me in a different mindset in a way that is actually very freeing.
Yeah.
I think. Because when I'm thinking about how do I prepare for the Feast of the Nativity, really my mind kind of goes to a different place. Because to me, when you celebrate a feast, like the Feast of Pascha, I'm thinking of togetherness, I'm thinking of liturgy, I'm thinking of really trying to, absorb spiritually what is joyful about that, what is life-changing about that. So that's one way, is just in my head, I keep telling myself, like, okay, how am I going to, prepare for this Feast of the Nativity?
Right, not Christmas, secular Christmas, whatever, but the Feast of the Nativity.
Another thing I like to do is to actually write down my ideals versus my non-negotiables. So maybe my ideals might be, okay, send out Christmas cards. That would be great. Bake cookies for the neighbors, or like you said, maybe get out and go ice skating or something like that. These are things that would be ideals if I could. But my non-negotiables are, okay, I know we're going to go to liturgy and Christmas vigil. So we have that. I know we always like to have, at our house, we like to do a big brunch. Like that's a big meal for us. But with the other, I can be flexible. Like the rest of the day, I mean, we don't have anything set in stone. So I don't have anything non-negotiable about that. So I can really simplify that process. And by beginning to separate those things out, I know that if my ideals don't get done, it doesn't make or break my experience.
Right.
These are the things that I hold on to as this to me represents our celebration of that. And I want it to be one of togetherness. I want to be sure that like a non-negotiable for me is checking in with parishioners or neighbors or people who may not have family at the holidays. How am I being attentive to my neighbor during this time? And so just by kind of thinking that through, it really helps to kind of call the extra attention to call out what truly is fulfilling about this experience versus what is just stress-inducing.
Exactly. And I often think of that in terms of to the meal, everything that needs to be cooked and included in this meal. And I think one of the best things, if you have a family, talk to your family, ask all of them, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are one or two things that you really love about how our family does Christmas and want to make sure that it's included? For all you know, something that you are hanging on tightly and stressing out about, they could care less about.
Homemade whipped cream, where you get a can of whipped cream. I mean,
mine is always homemade.
I know it is. I know. But even of course, I'd love to do homemade cinnamon rolls. Those are beautiful things. And I for sure think, I love the smell of that. I love everything about it. But I need to remember that, are these expectations of these things adding joy or stress to the family even? I want to be present and calm and joyful. So I may need to cut a few corners in order to be that, not be harried and, easily frustrated. And, so by, really focusing on that calm and togetherness, it helps me make decisions that are going to keep my mindset peaceful and tranquil.
Yes. While you still make homemade whipped cream, I hope. So, because the store-bought stuff's terrible, Molly. I know. We know that. Here's the awesome thing. We're Orthodox, which really makes it easier because the first day of Christmas starts on Christmas. So we don't have to get our Christmas cards out right now. We can wait. We have 12 days to write them, send them out, or write them right before Christmas and people are getting them after Christmas. That's okay. No one's going to judge you for that. And then also, we're in the middle of the Nativity Fast, which the church is really calling us into quietness and retrospection, and that's what's important right now, not all the crazy decorate your house kind of stuff.
In our open chat recently, again, with our members, we were talking about these holiday traditions, and they had such beautiful traditions. A couple of them were talking about how they start on that first day of Christmas. They actually have activities planned for each of those 12 days, just simple things. One is to go sledding, or one is to go ice skating, and they save those until Christmas actually starts, which is on December 25th, which is something I had never done. But I thought that's such a lovely way to continue to celebrate.
Right.
And maybe take some of the pressure off this end, beforehand, so you can have that quiet and preparation. But remember that, we're continuing to celebrate. So if we do some of these things after the 25th, it's perfectly acceptable.
Exactly. And we can make gingerbread houses anytime. We can drink hot chocolate anytime.
That's true.
Can go ice skating anytime.
That's true. We don't have to fit it all into this 3-week period.
Yeah, right. This time frame. So with that, that's the end of our December show. And there are, of course, ways that you can keep in touch with us. Join our community. We really love it when we have more people to get to know and more people to just inspire us. We inspire each other.
That's true.
We really want to get to know you. So, of course, the first thing is our course.
Yes, our course. I'm very excited about that. So we are relaunching our 6 Weeks to Sanity course. I'm really ready to go through it again myself. I was just thinking that. I was excited about that. So please stay tuned. You can go to filledwithless.com. You can sign up for our weekly wellness newsletter to keep yourself updated and to keep yourself posted on any new announcements about that.
Right. Plus, we're going to be coming out with a bunch of like free courses and all kinds of reference material and everything that you won't want to miss. That's just totally free. We're just building it for you out of our love for you. And then, of course, there's the membership. As you know, this is a member-supported ministry, and our members make it happen. So that's why we're here with you today on this show even. One of the things that we focused on this month, as we talked about prior, was personal asceticism. It's been a wonderful month of really honing in on that. Next month, we're going to be talking about establishing a rule of life. Dr. Brian Russell is going to sit in on our membership meeting at the end of January. He has all kinds of resources for us, and I can't wait. I met him a couple months ago, I should say, on my podcast, and he's really a delightful man. So that's coming up in the membership, so you'll want to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
Yeah.
I love when we can bring on guests.
Me too.
I really think that's awesome. So for our book club, we are actually going to practice what we preach this December by taking a breather for meeting. We know that you have a lot on your plate, we have a lot on our plates, and we're going to give everyone a break and pick it up again in January with the book, The Northern Lights of Christ by Nick Hartman. This book sounds so intriguing to me. I've been really wanting to get my hands on it. Just some of the description is folklorist Nick Hartman takes us across the intersection between Nordic customs and Orthodox Christian faith in this perfect conversation starter for your fall and winter gatherings. So he's looking at these customs, sometimes known, we call it hygge, but customs that all are about cozy and nurturing and balancing, and I think it'll be a great winter book club pick for us.
Me too. And I actually got the book already, and it's really an easy read.
Okay.
It'll be a fast read, easy read, and I think we're going to have great conversations in our book club around it. And Nick Hartman, if you're watching right now, you and I are talking next week, so you can come on my podcast, and I'm going to ask you if you will be a guest for our book club. So the heat is on, but we just love it when we can introduce people to the authors of the books that we're reading, and they're able to answer questions and everything. So it'll be a lovely time. Thank you so much for joining us for our December show for our anniversary. It's been a year, our anniversary show.
To us. We should go out to lunch.
We should. Let's go out to lunch after this. You know, we're thinking about you, we're praying for you, and we will catch you next month.
Take care.